Welcome to this morning's live stream. I wanted to invite y'all to talk about, oh, I wanted to share with y'all a little bit about the patterns that have been cropping up outside my direct work in publishing my newsletter. And so today I'm talking to folks who feel like their Substack has stalled. And I'm here to tell you that you're not broken, that we know from some very reliable sources that things are just changing on Substack. And I want to open a door to consider that sometimes things also stall because our writing systems aren't supporting us anymore, or our creative systems aren't supporting us anymore. So I'm so happy to see everybody joining in. I'm really glad you're here. Um, This is actually a really organic segue into where we're going in August in the publishing spectrum. I will be focusing a lot on the structures that support us because I think that um, whenever whenever we see a shift in the force, like we've seen across Substack recently, there's just been drops in signups, drops in upgrades. People have been unsubscribing. We tend to look at um, all the things that are outside us. And today I want to focus, and in the month of August, we're going to focus on the things that are supporting how we actually get our best work into the world and what those structures are. So um, today's live stream is pulling from basically a month of patterns that I've been watching. So offline, I work with authors and creative entrepreneurs on Voxer and in creative engagements. And today's live stream is a way for me to just simmer down like the things that I'm saying on repeat that people need to help open things up for them again. And so that's the value of being here today, is that you get the gift of a month of my brain pattern tracking and noticing what's surfacing over and over and over again. So to start with, I wanted to just kind of cast a vision of like what's happening behind the scenes in the publications that I work with, and what are the themes that are showing up, and just in case this is resonant for any of y'all. So we're talking a lot about creative permission. Folks are feeling a straitjacket right now. And so a lot of the questions that I'm feeling are about, how do I like open open up again? How do I open that inspirational sort of side of what I used to love about publishing? Talking about nervous system awareness a lot, because right now the world's kind of in a tumultuous place, and that affects our ability to cultivate creative sort of output. So we're talking a lot about how to be aware of your own limits, and when you reach the ending of what you can actually handle. Talking about structural intuition. So, like, there are so many people out there who create really big production environments. And I think a lot of times for individual creators, we think, oh, well, I should do it that way. I should structure my work this way. And in the end, it ends up creating a barrier to being able to produce the work that we actually want to give to our audiences. And then the final thing we were kind of exploring this month was self-trust and like what our rhythms actually are. And so a lot of the work that we did was mirroring what is working and what is getting in the way, and just little like beliefs that keep people stuck. So before I dive into the patterns that I had been tracking in the month of July, I'm wondering if you can just jump into the comments with me and tell me, like, how do you feel right now about your writing systems, or if you're actually writing and then publishing on Substack? Um, how does it feel? Like, what's one word that comes to mind when you think about taking an idea for an essay or a recipe from concept to publication? It could be any word. It could be a word like clunky. It could be nourishing. It could be in a great place with your structures. It could feel forced. Some folks say they feel really heavy and then they get bogged down. So if y'all want to share really quickly, I'd love to hear how your systems feel to you right now. So, and Cameron says promising. Julie says she feels paralysis. Okay, yep, I I noticed that. Reyes says non-existent. Roberta says inconsistent. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally Feel you there. Brenda says depleting. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely feeling a lot of that, which is interesting during summer because we're supposed to be replenished during summer. But I would just affirm you that like lots of people are feeling depleted. And that's actually pretty normal when there's been a big shift like there has been on Substack. Um, um, we are people of habit. We like our supports, and when those supports change, it's really hard to shift. Jan Elizabeth says overwhelming. Yep. Really common. It's really common for our best intentions for how we get our work into the world to actually create um, more. I sometimes like to think of it like as creative goblins, instead of like supporting the right flow of what needs to come into the world. Um, all right, let me make sure I didn't miss anybody. And for those who are joining, we're just kind of talking about our writing structures and how your current publishing setup is feeling to you, and just dropping like a word into the comments about how you are relating to the process, going from concept to working it to completion. So Jamie says she feels disassociated. And that's a pretty big word. That's a pretty big word. Um, yeah. So um, so today I just want to just honor that, like, whenever I hear someone say that they feel disassociated or they feel like they're paralyzed, um, I've worked in so many different structures and publishing environments, and and the last 3 years have been spent inside Substack specifically trying to translate what actually is necessary to create the work we want to bring into the world. And if there's one thing I can say before we jump into these, um, the things I've been saying on repeat to folks in July, is that everything that anybody has said in the comments, I feel is incredibly workable. Whenever I hear someone is overwhelmed or dissociated, I'm actually energized because knowing what the texture of the block is actually half of the challenge. And so I just want everyone to feel encouraged that like what you're encountering, it truly is workable, and that it's not a reflection of the quality of your work, which is really easy for, I think, creative people to conflate, that their ability to get their work out is a reflection of the quality of what's trying to emerge. So be encouraged. Okay. Um, okay. So one of the things that I have said on repeat in one way or another, around writing structures, is that you are not a reporter with a beat. You are a voice. And I have a degree in journalism. I was an editor, and had reporters who reported to me. And there is a point to being really, really narrowed down on what a reporter was allowed to talk about and allowed to cover. And it's because we didn't want reporters double covering and losing coverage on something that could that the paper actually needed to cover. And so the beat was designed to keep the reporter focused. That's not what Substack is. Substack is not a place where you have to pick your beat and you stay inside that narrow rhythm and you work that beat and you never move. I sometimes think of it, branding has always felt like a very restrictive bucket. And um and I've encountered a lot of Substack writers who think that once they've said they're going to talk about this one thing, they can't talk about anything else. And certainly once you have a much larger audience, your words really do tick people in certain directions, and you have to be more mindful when you have audience of 100,000 plus on your newsletter. But the reality is that thinking of yourself like a reporter with a beat who has to stay contained is actually, in my experience, a creative straitjacket. And so what we want to think about is the substance of what we're giving. And so um uh rather than like the answer to the structure, because I really do see that like today's readers are learning, they are following voices, not categories. And so if they trust your voice and you want to bring in a concept that is maybe adjacent and not directly around what they've what they've signed up for necessarily, readers can usually hang with you for a little bit. So I'm just wondering, have you ever felt pressure to niche down or define your beat on Substack when maybe what you wanted was to actually speak as a whole person? Just tell me in the comments. And I see we've got some folks chiming in. I'm going to try and get up a little higher and make sure I didn't miss anybody. Oh, Brenda says, I'm a marketer. Don't ever let your brand restrict you. Yeah, 100%. The brand should reflect who you are. Beth says, I've heard Substack is not a great place for fiction authors, but that's what I am. And I'm here trying to build a community of fiction readers. Um, yeah, so fiction is definitely a different kind of um, beast. The nature of being a fiction writer is very different, and the reality is that if you focus just on a piece of book that you want people to buy, other than the author they're coming to meet, it's going to be really challenging to grow. And I'm actually working with someone right now who's working on a fiction novel behind the scenes, and we're talking about a really strategic and intentional way to tease out. Um, Fiction pieces in between their larger sort of arc, their umbrella of writing that they feel called to do. So, um, yeah. So M. Cameron Harris says there's a perceived pressure to narrow in. Yeah. So I think it's really important to realize that the scope of what you're interested in will become narrow naturally when you find the thing that you can't put down. And I really trust that creative process, that you don't have to pigeonhole yourself down in order to create some sort of 10x growth. Whatever the hack folks are saying to do. That I really lean pretty heavily on following your energy, following your interests and instincts, and then working with a quality I call readership mindfulness, and doing those things very intentionally. So thanks for chiming in, folks. The second thing that I've been telling folks a lot is that the most sustainable writing structure is the one that resonates with you month over month. Most likely, you don't need a rigid calendar to keep track of your things. You probably just need a publishing rhythm that your nervous system recognizes as flexible and supportive. Because ultimately, the way that I see structure is that it's not about like punishment. It's more about recognizing, what do I return to naturally again and again, without dreading it. Like that dread, I trust that message of dread. I trust what's coming up for you, because I don't want you pulling a story from a place of dread. I want you pulling from a place of resonance inside you. So um, I'm wondering if there's ever been a time when you've had a publishing rhythm, that you just knew this worked for you. Like, it was maybe even surprising. Like, what did it feel like when you realized, oh, I tried this new way of writing, or I tried this new way of editing, or I tried this new way of making a graphic, and it was a surprise. It was a surprise to you. While y'all are kind of simmering on that, I'm gonna scroll up. I see some comments coming in, and I am getting better at finding them and scrolling up on the layout here. Um, So Jamie says she's starting to think that she's been trying to use a niche topic as a crutch while I find my voice, but realizing I may need to lead with voice. Yeah, and Brenda chimed in and she said, bingo. Yeah, definitely. Brand trying to niche down can actually be a thing that hurts your voice ultimately. Um, yeah. So M. Cameron Harris says he's never really had a publishing rhythm. He's just looking for they're just looking for a basic pattern. Yeah, so um there's definitely pros and cons. I'll just say that, like, I started on Substack letting go of all of the things that I had implemented once in my previous life, for clients, because I realized that the work I was trying to do was not the work that needed to be clamped down by rigid structures. I needed to learn how to let a different voice come to the surface. So I definitely support anybody having a free range writing season and saying, like, I don't need any structure whatsoever. Like, more power to you. Let's see. Ellie says, I'm getting stuck at editing my posts, as sure there is an art to it, but I'm not getting it as processed. Yeah. So we're going to talk. I actually have a couple of notes about what the editing process is for and how to make editing more about a moment where you tune in for how you serve your readers, especially if you're someone who's not working with an editor, who doesn't have a small team. There's a moment of readership mindfulness in how you edit, and I've got a couple of pieces of guidance I think I can share there, Ellie. Jamie says she was publishing 3 times a week and feeling much more joyful since cutting it down to 2x. Jen says on writing rhythm, she's learning to lean into her topic, hyperfocus, and then take a break to recharge the creative well. Yeah, that is definitely really, really important. Because if we're showing up to well dry every day, like what's coming out, right? It's so nice to see folks joining. We're in the middle of talking about things that I've been seeing on repeat to the folks that I'm working with. So you're getting the benefit of the patterns that have been showing up in July. And the third thing I've been saying on repeat is that you are not broken if looking at your dashboard makes you want to curl up inside. I had actually a really rich conversation with a writer about the nature of how we respond when we're asked to look at um, the metrics behind our work actually tells us something about which part of our creativity and our brain that we nourish the most or that we most naturally start with. And so um, I wanted to briefly try and share the analogy that we kind of came up with in our coaching session, which was that it is very normal if you have spent the last 20 years in a creative writing sort of rhythm and flow, um, that is the place where you have the most confidence. Your neurological synapses, they are firing. You know what you're doing there. You are connected um, to who you are as a creative person. And the reality is that when you go from expressive mode to analytical publishing, I am managing this thing mode, that is a completely different side of your brain that you are engaging. And I think that is why it often feels like there's this long, dry desert in between that you have to walk through from your creative, juicy, confident sort of space into the analytical side. And so I just want to acknowledge that jolt I don't see as a red flag. It's almost predictable at this point that if most of your work and most of where you feel regenerated is in the creative ideation and publishing process, that the metrics and the function and the structure is going to feel foreign. It's going to feel foreign. And so I want to just acknowledge that part of publishing a newsletter and helping a newsletter grow is being mindful of your reader's experience and then intentionally looking at that data to understand their collective experience inside your publication. That understanding data is how you give your readers a collective voice into into what you're producing. So my Jamie's already ahead of me. My question for this pattern was what happens in your body when you check your Substack dashboard. I think if I can scroll up here, I think I saw her say something like she curls into the fetal position every time. I think that's really normal. What happens for y'all when you think about, shifting from that place of creative ideation, writing, thinking about what you want to share next, and then being asked to shift into dashboard analytical. Do you feel curious? Do you feel like collapsing? Do you feel like it's a threat? A lot of people feel like the data is a creative threat. Which I think makes complete sense to me from a neurological perspective. Like I think it is a threat because this is a whole new place in our minds where we haven't built up the right thinking structures to know what the data's purpose is and how it influences or doesn't influence what we choose to publish. So Does anybody else agree? Do you have more curiosity when you think about your dashboard, or is it a head in the sand, push it away, don't show it to me? It's totally okay. Let me make sure I haven't missed anybody. Um, okay, well, I'm not foreign to folks sort of going really quiet when I ask about data. It's actually really normal. Oh, M. Cameron Harris says they feel ignorant and curious. Well, great, you're in the right spot because um, I have learned how to. And I offer a lot of support to my readers around how to relate positively to data and to see it more as a relational connection to your readership rather than a final report card on what's happening inside your publication. Rhea says she feels lost. Jan Elizabeth says she prefers not to know sometimes. Staying in the dark around them is actually really wise for most smaller publications. I don't recommend looking more than once a quarter, especially if you're not trying to track any sort of revenue or growth patterns. If you don't need to do that, some of my larger clients they look at it pretty closely because it affects a much larger sort of bucket of folks. Um, Jamie says even though she's in the fetal position, she is curious. Ginger says she tries to only look once in a while. Jen says she likes data and sends a heart. um, Beth shares, I don't always understand what my dashboard means. What are good numbers? I don't know. Well, Beth, I'll look at the end here. I've got lots of resources in the publishing spectrum about where to look and what these numbers mean, and which ones don't matter. Which ones don't tell you something about what's resonating in your publication and what matters to your readers, and how to understand who your readers are better. Ginger says she looks at it like a report card. And Jamie, wow, this is great. This is great, you guys. Thank you so much. I've never actually had to shift because there were so many comments in the chat. This feels great. Um, okay, so the fourth thing that I have been having to remind folks of this month or last month in July, is that um, the editing process is best held as a way to think about the reader, that you're protecting the mission of your publication when you stop to think about how the reader will experience what what you're about to give them. Um, I like to think of it as editing is where your voice tries to make space for your reader's nervous system. And that this is a form of reader care. And so when you're thinking about um, this is a really common thing for creative writers and creative entrepreneurs is how much do I rely on and protect my creative sovereignty? And I say 100% you have to protect that. That is the source of what you're building. But there is a way to create a structure so that you are holding a very respectful place for considering what am I giving my readers month over month? What am I asking them to do? Am I engaging them with a reflection of knowing who they are or endeavoring to understand who they are? Um, I think that's a really important part, a important role. Is that editing is for the reader and it helps you protect your mission. It helps you step back once the flurry of sort of emotional creation and ideation settles down, to be mindful about what you're asking your readers to do. So, the fifth thing I've been telling folks on repeat is that um, permission is a practice, not a mood. And by this, I mean that you won't always feel ready, um, but permission is about, what's I going to say? Permission is about making everything inside your writing structure and your writing responses workable. And that if you suddenly find that you're not able to identify, let's just say, the energy for writing your novel, I really trust that. I really, really do. I trust those instincts, and I want to always open the door to create curiosity around um, why, rather than saying, I do this thing at this time every day, no matter what. I think when we operate like that and we remove permission, we also remove some power inside our creative sovereignty. And so that is something that I just wanted to mention and that has come up. This is more specific to each individual person. Like, what do they need permission for? You might need permission to hand back your newsletter for a while. You might need permission to say, I know it doesn't make sense, but I'm really passionate about this topic right now. I'm going to flesh it out. I'm going to work with an editor. I'm going to flesh out these ideas and try to figure out why do I feel called to this topic when I typically write over here in this field. And so this sort of permission based interaction is what I find is the best regenerative sort of cycle for folks, so that you don't get stuck in a only this or only that. And I think this also crosses over to something earlier I said where we were talking about permission to not niche down and to instead actually sink more deeply and more confidently into your creative impulses. Um, number 6, the sixth thing that I've been telling folks, is that not every idea deserves a long form essay. The thing that I like to ask folks when I work with them is how hefty is the hook? How hefty is the hook of what you're trying to say in this essay? This tends to resonate with folks because it helps focus on. First of all, it helps you zero down on what's your thesis statement here? What is your declarative statement that you're telling readers? What do you want them to take away? And how hefty is it? Does it deserve something short form? Is it actually a little bit lighter than what you usually cover? Is it extremely layered and complex? And does it deserve the breathing space of a three-part series? And when we stop to ask, like, how hefty is this hook? That is also a moment where you're practicing readership mindfulness, where you're saying, what can my readers reasonably digest? And also, this idea, this hook that I'm trying to give the reader, it deserves the right form to come into the world. So, for example, today's live stream, I actually wrote out in a 1,500 word essay first, and something felt wrong about it. And I like a long form essay. I'm not someone who says like you've got to stay under 500 words to keep your readers engaged. Like, I don't. I am very loyal to the spirit of creative form. Um, but there was just something about this essay where I felt that what would actually make it better is to hear from folks about whether or not they were actually experiencing these things too, and what words would they use to actually engage. And so I sat with it, and I basically last night I pulled the essay. I didn't schedule it, and instead I jumped in and scheduled this live stream, and I just trusted that the hook of what I wanted to share needed a different sort of setting in which to share it. And so I think this also kind of overlaps with like that permission to change your mind, permission to shift, and permission to trust what the heft of the hook really needs. And so I guess I'm wondering right now, I'm going to pause for a second and just I'd love to hear from folks. Have you ever forced an idea into long form when maybe you thought afterwards, like maybe it got crickets and you're wondering why? Does the idea of thinking about the heft of the hook help you? And have you ever considered what other form your writing might have? Um, and you can just say yes, or I'm devoted to long form and I don't know what to do. I'm definitely understand that as well. And the reality is that sometimes some writers write with such elegance and such depth that long form is really that's their medium, and they have to stay there. I think what I'm suggesting here is more to have a moment of mindfulness to make sure that what you're sharing isn't going to get lost. And I think that's a really big part of how we build our writing structures into how we publish, is that we take into account what we're um, asking our readers and what the piece actually needs. Um, let's see here. So Brenda says it does help. I have one long form essay I held on publishing for this reason. Awesome, that's great. Um, Cameron Harris says I think and write too long. Writing a meaningful short note is much more a challenge for me. Yeah, it's a discipline. Editing is a discipline. Narrowing it down is a discipline. What I told someone actually just yesterday is that there is a sacred calling in good writing to do some of the digesting for your readers. That is ultimately what we're meant to do as writers, is not just to put something into the world, but to digest the parts that don't matter to the reader, to know every single detail. We distill that for them in order to create a more cohesive writing experience. So totally feel you there. Jen Zuck says, yes, I definitely have experienced a realization that an essay was way too long and too much for one post. Heft does help. Um, Brenda asks, can you give an example of what a hefty hook looks like? So I think a hefty hook, um, I think it's trying to get the reader to change their mind about too many things in one essay. It's introducing potentially lots and lots of fresh research, and then laying out lots of changes that you want to see systemically. Let's just say that's how you write. Instead of breaking it down into so in my experience, if someone came to me and said, I have this body of research, and I have a bunch of takeaways that I think are going to affect several different industries. I would say, okay, we're going to think logically around first of all, the readerships for these, and we're going to think about where the research matters and belongs. We're going to think about where the story element and emotional element belongs as well. We're going to think about trying to throw too much into it. It's like throwing the whole bucket in when it could be broken down for easier digestion. Okay, Brenda says that helps. Awesome. Ginger says I write shorter essays and lots of graphic breaks, like tying a story together in parts. Yeah, I think that's great. I think it'd be really interesting to know. Like, have you ever experimented with different kinds of formats and how your audience sort of responded to those and how you responded to those? Some folks just stay in a really good creative zone, and I think the really important part of like writing structures and publishing structures is that you don't fix something that doesn't need mending, and you just know what works and what is actually supportive. Um, and the final thing that I have been saying on um, somewhat of a regular basis is that you're allowed to publish slowly and you're allowed to stay seen. And I am not the organizational guru who is going to sit here and tell you how to publish to 10x your output. Um, but I do want to just say that like part of publishing slowly involves knowing where your writing piles are and knowing what you need in order for your best ideas to sort of alchemize over time. Some folks do not work like that. They are extremely regimented, they're extremely organized. That has not ever been the way that I find my best words and bring my best words into the world. And so I just want to honor that, like, if your style is is more scattered, that doesn't mean that it is less or unreliable. For example, like I write multiple essays at one time. I have, like, some people have a tall pile of books on their nightstand. I literally have had up to 7 or 8 essays in process. What I'm publishing in the month of August literally started back in April, I think. It might have been late March. And I tended to it slowly when I knew I had more clarity around that thing and what I wanted it to turn into. And I also just waited because I needed to also watch my readership and see what they were doing in the summer. Summertime is a really important time to plan for your energy and what they're doing. And so ultimately what ended up happening is the pieces sort of build themselves. And I've learned to give myself permission to let them build until I just see, all right, essay baby, you are ready to go into the world. And I trust that you're ready to go into the world. And I let the right ingredients sort of fall into the piece because I know myself well enough now that if I push myself to publish at a certain schedule, I won't get everything I need to out into the world. And so that's the seventh and final thing I've just been telling folks kind of offline a lot is that publishing slowly does not mean you are not publishing with quality. It means that you're tending to your own rhythms and recognizing where you get stuck, and to let yourself wiggle your way your way into the world. So I with that said, I wanted to just open up really quickly and just ask, like, how does this land for folks who feel like if I'm not fast enough, if I'm not on time, that somehow I am behind, I am not a quality writer, I am not organized, and I'll never amount to anything. Does anybody else feel that? And what does it feel like to know that like there are um literally thousands of different ways to build a writing structure, and they actually already all live inside you. They're already inside you, and they very rarely need more than just a little tweak or a little polish to help you feel supported. Um, I'd love to just hear a little bit like um, how that lands. And I see some folks already chiming in. Thank you so much. Brenda says it's so validating. I work similarly. Ginger says I love this. Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate that. Um, yeah. So Rhea says this is encouraging. Thanks, Rhea. Really appreciate that. Um, Jen says, I love how you always remind me to be myself and follow my instincts rather than stress myself over a formula of publishing guidelines. Yeah, yeah. So it's it is a constant dance. And that's what I've realized in just my offline work is that um there's a dance between when when an essay wants to play or when a recipe wants to play. I love to dabble in the kitchen. It is one of my favorite things. It's how I engage different sides of like my sensory experience. There's a similar sort of simmering structure that I think translates into writing as well. Is and in that like you are looking for and waiting for the right smell, the right temperature, the right texture. You're feeling into how you publish in the same ways that someone might like really feel into when their dinner is done. And I've seen a couple of folks joining in who write recipes on Substack that I love very much. And so I can't help but bring in some of my cooking stuff. It's one of my special interests. Um, so with all of this said, y'all, with all of this sort of laid out, um, I I have a really important month of August ahead for the folks who are in the publishing spectrum. I am basically laying out for my paid subscribers the structure for how to build your own writing system, and this is not. I think it's going to strike a really good balance between do whatever you want, laissez-faire, run wild, because I'm also not that kind of person. I do need some structure. I recognize the need for a little bump back into the back into the line in human factors engineering. They call this human drift, that we all drift away from the thing that we know we need most. But there's an art to it, and I think the art is inside each individual person to figure out the tools and the mechanisms that help you stay on track. And so I'm hopeful that in the month of August, y'all will be joining me for these modules. They'll be essay based, where you can just try a new thing each week to think through these different containers that I have found show up over and over again for writers and creative entrepreneurs, and we'll be working through them um, in our community. I also wanted to just mention that like this is work that I do offline for folks. So if you're like, I know I'm stuck, I know where I need to bounce ideas off of. I work with folks. I offer Voxer coaching weeks where we dive into the specifics of what you do. I love my newsletter community because we have so many folks who come from so many different backgrounds. But oftentimes, like there's just a thing that happens where the real magic in changing or improving or just making your writing structures more supportive, it really is in the specificity of how you function and how you move through the world. And so, what I want most for everyone is that in the month of August, um, that you have some way to reset your writing structures if they need a reset, to lightly tweak them if you think they need a tweak. And there's a couple ways to do that in the month of August with me, through the publishing spectrum, or through these Voxer coaching weeks, which I will share a link to right here if anybody is interested, because I am learning. I know how to send URLs in the chat box. I'm so technologically advanced. Um, but yeah, so these are great ways to just get feedback. I will be in the comments some inside the publishing spectrum to support and answer questions. But if you want direct access to me to talk through where your writing structure might be getting in the way of keeping your momentum up in your Substack, I'd love to connect, reach out, and support you and just answer questions. And for those of you who don't know what Voxer is, it's basically this walkie-talkie where you can be in your pajamas in your room, or you can be on a walk, or I can be on a walk, and we can send one or two messages each day and just work through different parts of whatever you feel stuck with. So, anyways, I really appreciate everybody being here. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, thank you for all the hearts. I wish I could see who was hearting, but I will just take them and I will just assume that everyone's sending collective love. So, thanks again for being here. I will be sharing this as a replay later today for folks who missed it. So, if you're watching this in the replay, feel free to drop your comments in about your own writing structures and how to basically support a more creatively generative and supportive publication on Substack. Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much, y'all. Talk to you soon. Bye.